Lena sat on the edge of her bed staring at her phone screen. Her best friend had sent another reminder message that read, "Please don't cancel this time. Just go, you might actually enjoy it." She sighed, tossing the phone onto the pillow beside her. She wasn't sure why she had agreed in the first place. A blind date at a cafe with strangers, and something about everyone having to share a little talent. It sounded awkward. She hadn't touched a piano in months. She didn't even like meeting new people anymore. For the last few years, Lena's life had been quiet. Too quiet. She worked as an assistant at a small printing shop, kept to herself and rarely went out except for groceries or evening walks. After a long and painful breakup, she had promised herself never to let anyone get too close again. It was safer that way, but her best friend had insisted that staying home forever wasn't living. "Just one evening," she had said. "You don't even have to fall in love. Just show up, drink coffee, talk to someone new. Who knows? Maybe you'll laugh again." Lena had laughed at that thought. Laugh again. It sounded almost foreign. The sun had already set by the time she finally decided to go. She slipped on a plain beige sweater, jeans, and a soft scarf she used whenever she felt nervous. It made her feel like she was wrapped in something familiar. As she stepped outside, the cool air brushed against her face. The streets were glowing with yellow lights and quiet chatter from nearby restaurants. For a moment, she almost turned back. But something in her heart said, just try. The cafe wasn't far, just a 10-minute walk. When she reached the door, she could already hear soft laughter and music from inside. The sign outside read, "Cafe Amora, Music Night and Blind Dates." The words made her chuckle nervously. What a strange idea, she thought. Music and dating. Inside, the place was warm and cozy, filled with the smell of coffee and baked bread. Small lights hung from the ceiling like tiny stars. A young woman at the counter smiled and handed Lena a small card with her name on it. "You're number 7, she said kindly. "Just relax and enjoy the night. Everyone gets a turn to share something small about themselves. Sing, read, play music, tell a story." It's all lighthearted. Lena froze. "Wait, something small like music?" The hostess nodded. "Yes, just something simple. You can even hum a tune if you like. The point is to connect." Lena smiled weakly. "Right. Connect." She found an empty seat near the corner where she could see everyone but not be seen too much. The room was filled with people chatting in small groups. Some looked excited, others nervous. In the corner, a tiny stage was set up with a guitar, a microphone, and an upright piano that looked old but well cared for. Lena's heart raced as she looked at it. That piano reminded her of her father's, the one she grew up playing before everything changed. Her father had been the one who taught her to love music. He used to say, "You don't play to impress, you play to feel." She could still hear his voice saying that. But after he passed away, she couldn't bring herself to play anymore. Every note reminded her of him, and it hurt too much. The host, a cheerful middle-aged man with glasses, clapped his hands and welcomed everyone. "Tonight," he said, "we're doing something a little different. You've all come to meet someone new, but before that, let's hear a bit from each of you. Don't worry, nothing serious, just a little fun." One by one, people took turns. A woman sang a few lines from a pop song. A man told a silly joke that made the room laugh. Another guest played guitar and everyone clapped along. The atmosphere was light, friendly, easy. Lena tried to relax, sipping her tea slowly, hoping somehow they'd forget about her. But then she heard the host call, "Number 7. Lena." Her stomach tightened. All eyes turned toward her. She stood up slowly, her knees trembling slightly, and forced a small smile. Hi," she said quietly. "I'm not really a performer. I just play a little piano sometimes." The host grinned. "Perfect. The piano's right there. Play us something simple." A small wave of polite claps encouraged her. She walked up to the piano, her hands cold and shaky. She sat down, running her fingers lightly across the keys. They were smooth and cool to the touch. For a moment, she just sat there staring at the black and white keys. Everyone waited patiently. Then she took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "Just one tune, one simple tune." She began to play. At first, the notes came out soft and uneven, like her fingers had forgotten where to go. But slowly, they found their way. The melody she chose was one she hadn't played in years, a tune she had written for her father. It was simple, built from short phrases that rose and fell like gentle waves. As she played, something inside her shifted. The room around her faded away. She wasn't in the cafe anymore. She was a child again, sitting beside her father on a Sunday afternoon, watching him nod along as she practiced. She could almost hear him whisper, "That's it, Lena, feel it. Don't think too much." The melody carried sadness, but also peace. Every note seemed to tell a story of love, loss, and quiet memory. The cafe fell silent. Even the sound of cups being set down stopped. At a table near the back, a man named Daniel looked up for the first time that evening. He had been scrolling through his phone, half listening to the performances, just waiting for the night to be over. He didn't even want to be there. His sister had signed him up and insisted he go. But now, as he listened to Lena play, something in the music caught his attention. He couldn't explain it. There was something raw in the way she touched the keys. Not polished, not perfect, but full of real feeling. It reminded him of something he hadn't felt in years. Lena finished the piece softly, letting the last note fade into the air. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then gentle applause began, growing louder, warmer. She smiled nervously, gave a small nod, and quickly returned to her seat. Her hands were trembling, but her heart felt lighter. She hadn't expected anyone to care about her little tune, but somehow it had touched them. The rest of the night went by in laughter and light conversation. Lena tried to blend into the crowd again, but several people came over to compliment her playing. "That was beautiful," one said. "It felt so personal." Another added, "You should play more often." She thanked them, feeling shy but happy. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel invisible. Daniel couldn't stop glancing in her direction. He didn't approach her that night, not yet. But he couldn't forget the way that melody made him feel. It had awakened something inside him, a memory of his mother who used to hum similar tunes when he was little. She had passed away years ago, and ever since music had become painful for him. But now it felt like the sound had brought her memory back to life, even for a moment. When the event ended, people began to leave in pairs, exchanging numbers and smiles. Lena stayed behind for a bit, helping the host tidy up some of the tables. She felt calmer now, almost proud that she hadn't run away. The host thanked her warmly. "That was really touching," he said. "You play from the heart." "That's rare these days," Lena smiled faintly. "It's just something my father used to teach me." As she stepped out into the cool night air, she looked up at the stars above the streetlights. Something about the night felt different, not magical exactly, but softer, warmer. Maybe her friend was right. Maybe saying yes, even once, could lead somewhere unexpected. Across the street, Daniel stood for a moment, pretending to check his phone, but really watching her leave. He wanted to speak to her, but couldn't find the words. So instead, he just watched her walk away, the faint sound of her melody still echoing in his mind. Lena walked home with her hands tucked into her pockets, smiling quietly to herself. The night had gone better than she imagined. She had faced her fear, played again, and maybe, just maybe, something had begun to change. That small cafe had become more than just a place for strangers to meet. It was a place where music found its way into hearts that had forgotten how to feel. And though neither of them knew it yet, that simple tune she played that evening was the beginning of something that would soon connect two lives in ways neither could have expected. Daniel woke up earlier than usual the next morning. Sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, painting lines of gold on the floor. For the first time in a long while, he didn't reach for his phone or rush to make coffee. He just sat on the edge of his bed thinking about the woman who played the piano the night before. He couldn't even remember her name clearly. Lena, maybe? But he remembered the way she looked when she played. She wasn't performing for attention like most people. She seemed lost in her own world, like the melody came from somewhere deep inside her. That small tune had stayed in his head all night. He had even tried to hum it a few times before falling asleep. But it never sounded the same. He had gone to that cafe because his sister had begged him to get out of the house for once. He had no plan to actually meet someone. But now, for reasons he couldn't explain, he found himself wishing he had said something to her after the event. Just a simple thank you, or maybe ask where she learned to play like that. He spent the rest of the morning trying to shake the thought away. He went for a jog, made breakfast, and cleaned his apartment. But no matter what he did, that tune kept returning to him. It wasn't just music. It felt like a message, though he couldn't say what it meant. Across town, Lena sat by her small kitchen table, stirring her tea absent-mindedly. Her piano was only a few feet away, sitting by the window. The morning light made the keys glisten. almost calling her back. But she didn't play. Not yet. She kept replaying the previous night in her mind. The warmth of the cafe, the quiet attention of the crowd, and the strange calm she had felt while playing. For so long she had avoided music because it brought back too many memories, but last night something felt different. She thought of the man sitting near the back, the one who had looked up halfway through her tune. She had noticed his expression change as she played, soft at first, then almost emotional. She didn't know him, but for some reason that small reaction had given her comfort. It made her feel like her music had reached someone. Later that afternoon, while sorting through some papers at work, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her friend. So? How was the blind date thing? Lena smiled faintly and replied, not bad. I survived. A few seconds later, another message popped up. Did you meet anyone interesting? She paused before answering. Maybe. I'm not sure yet. Her friend sent back a row of excited emojis followed by, that means yes. Lena laughed quietly to herself. She didn't even know the man's name. She doubted she'd ever see him again. Still, for the rest of the day, she caught herself humming that same tune over and over. 2 days later, Daniel walked past Cafe Amora on his way home from work. The lights were still on and a familiar song played faintly from inside. He stopped at the window and peered in. The place looked just as it had the night of the event. Warm, glowing, inviting. He thought about going in, maybe asking the host if they knew who the piano player was. But he didn't want to sound like a stalker or someone desperate. He almost walked away, but something in him wouldn't let go. He finally went inside, pretending to order coffee. The same hostess who had handed out the cards last time recognized him. Oh, you came back, she said cheerfully. Are you here for another event? He shook his head. No, just wanted a coffee. I was here the other night. There was a woman who played piano. Do you happen to know if she comes here often? The hostess smiled kindly. Oh, the shy one who played that lovely tune? She's been here a few times before. She said she used to play as a hobby. Why are you hoping to hear her again? Daniel felt his face warm slightly. Maybe, her music. It reminded me of something. It was nice, the hostess nodded. She mentioned she might stop by again next week for open mic night. You should come, he smiled. Maybe I will. When he left the cafe, he felt strangely lighthearted. He hadn't felt that way in a long time. Meanwhile, Lena was sitting at her piano that same evening, hesitating before pressing her fingers on the keys. She hadn't played since the cafe, afraid the feeling wouldn't return. But as soon as she started, it did. The melody flowed again, a little clearer this time, a little softer around the edges. She didn't know why she felt drawn to that tune lately. It wasn't even her best piece. It was simple, almost too simple, but it meant something to her. It was her way of remembering her father, and all the times he told her that music could reach hearts when words couldn't. That night, as she played, she thought again about the man in the back of the cafe. She wondered what his story was. He hadn't smiled much, but there was a quiet sadness in his eyes that felt familiar. She knew that kind of loneliness. The following week came faster than she expected. Her friend texted again, asking if she'd go back to Cafe Amora. They're having another open night, the message read. You should go. You made such an impression last time. Lena hesitated, but eventually agreed. Something inside her wanted to go. Not just for the music, but because part of her hoped that maybe the man from the back table would be there again. When she arrived, the cafe was already buzzing with people. The same host greeted her with a big smile. Ah, you're back. Everyone loved your piano last time. Feel like playing again? She smiled shyly. Maybe later. She found a quiet seat near the corner, the same spot she'd sat in before. For a while, she just listened as people sang, laughed, and shared stories. Then, as she looked around the room, her eyes caught someone standing near the counter. Her heart skipped. It was him. Daniel noticed her at the same moment. For a second, they both froze. Then he smiled slightly and walked over. Hi, he said gently. You played here last week, right? She nodded. I did. I didn't think anyone would remember. He smiled again. I don't think anyone could forget. That was really something. Thank you, she said softly, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I wasn't sure if I should come again. I'm glad you did, he replied. They sat together, talking slowly at first, like two people learning to trust silence. He told her how her music reminded him of his mother, how he hadn't listened to a piano piece in years because it made him feel too much. She listened quietly, understanding every word. She told him how she stopped playing after her father passed away because the pain was too heavy. It wasn't a deep conversation at first, just small confessions, shared between sips of coffee and quiet pauses. But there was something gentle about the way they spoke to each other, something unforced. When the host later asked if anyone else wanted to perform, Daniel looked at her with a small smile. "You should play again," he said. "If you want to." She hesitated but then nodded. This time she didn't feel afraid. She walked to the piano, sat down, and played the same tune again, only now it sounded fuller, richer, like it carried more than just memory. Daniel watched from his seat, feeling the music settle deep in his chest. Every note seemed to speak what neither of them could yet say. When she finished, the room clapped again, but Daniel didn't join in right away. He just sat there, lost in the sound that still lingered in the air. Afterward, they walked out together into the cool night. The city lights shimmered off the pavement, and the breeze carried the faint scent of coffee. "That tune," he said softly. "It feels like home." She looked at him, her eyes warm but quiet. "It feels like that to me too," she said. They walked for a while without speaking, just side by side. Neither of them needed to fill the silence. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. When they finally parted, Daniel turned back once, watching her walk away under the streetlights. He didn't know what would come next, but for the first time in years, he felt a kind of hope. And somewhere deep inside her, Lena felt it too. It wasn't love yet, not something they could name or understand, but it was the beginning of something honest, something that felt like healing. That night, when she got home, she sat at her piano once more and played that same tune until the stars faded from the sky. She didn't know that across town, Daniel was doing the same thing, humming the melody softly to himself, smiling in the dark, feeling for the first time in a long time, at peace. Lena woke up the next morning with a small smile she didn't even notice at first. The memory of last night was still fresh in her mind. The music, the laughter, and especially the way Daniel had listened. He wasn't just being polite. He had listened with real attention, the kind that makes you feel like your words and your silence both matter. She made coffee and stood by the window, watching the street below. The city was waking up. People hurried to work, buses rolled by, and shopkeepers lifted shutters. It was an ordinary morning, but it didn't feel ordinary to her. Something inside her had shifted. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared. "Hi, this is Daniel. I hope it's okay that I asked the host for your number. If it's not, I'll delete it right away." Lena smiled, surprised but not uncomfortable. She sat down and typed slowly. "It's okay. I'm glad you texted." A minute later, his reply came. "Good, I wasn't sure if I should. I just wanted to say I really liked hearing you play again. That tune has been stuck in my head all day." She hesitated for a second before responding. "That's a good thing, I think." "It is," he wrote. "It makes everything feel a little calmer." They kept texting, at first about small things, music, coffee, the weather, their favorite places in the city. But as the conversation went on, it became more personal. They talked about what they did for work, how they both preferred quiet evenings to big parties, and how neither of them had expected to feel any connection that night at the cafe. Later, he wrote, "It's strange. I almost didn't go that night. My sister forced me to. I told her it was a waste of time." Lena replied, "My friend said the same to me. I almost stayed home." "Then I guess we both owe them thanks," he wrote. She stared at that message for a while before typing back, "Yes, maybe we do." That day, for the first time in months, Lena found herself humming while she worked. Even her coworkers noticed the change. "You seem happier today," one of them said, smiling. "Did something good happen?" Lena shrugged but couldn't hide her smile. "Maybe it did," she said. That evening, Daniel asked if she'd like to meet for coffee again. She agreed, though part of her was nervous. It had been a long time since she'd gone on anything that felt close to a real date. They met at the same cafe a few days later, though this time the place was quiet. No crowd, no music night. Just a few people reading or chatting softly. Daniel was already there, sitting at the same corner table where he'd sat before. He waved when he saw her, and she smiled as she walked over. "Hi," she said, sitting down. "Hi," he replied, smiling back. "It's nice to see you again." They ordered coffee, and for a few minutes they both seemed unsure of what to say. But then slowly the awkwardness faded. Conversation came easily, just like their texts. Daniel told her about his work at a small design studio, about how most days were quiet, but sometimes stressful. Lena told him about her job at the printing shop, and how she liked the smell of freshly printed paper. They laughed about small things, bad coffee, slow buses, awkward social events. But in between the laughter, there were quieter moments where neither of them spoke much. And yet the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt peaceful, almost grounding. After a while, Daniel said softly, "Can I ask something? That tune you played, did you really write it yourself?" Lena nodded. "Yes, a long time ago. It's beautiful," he said. "It feels like it tells a story." She smiled faintly. "It does. I wrote it for my father. He taught me to play when I was little. When he got sick, I used to play for him. That tune was the last thing I played before he passed away." Daniel's expression softened. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "That must have been hard." "It was," she admitted, looking down at her cup. "For a long time, I couldn't even touch a piano. Every time I tried, it just reminded me of him. But that night at the cafe, I don't know. I felt like maybe I should play again. And I'm glad I did." He nodded slowly. "I'm glad too." Then after a small pause, he said, "My mom used to play piano too. Not professionally, just at home. She loved it. She'd play when I was a kid and fill the house with music. After she passed, I couldn't listen to piano music at all. It hurt too much. But when you played that night, it felt like hearing her again." Lena looked at him, her eyes soft with understanding. "Maybe that's why the tune stayed with you," she said gently. "Maybe," he agreed. It felt familiar, like something I didn't realize I missed. For a long while they just sat there quietly, both lost in thought. The world outside the cafe windows kept moving, but time for them seemed to slow down. As they walked out later that evening, Daniel asked, "Do you ever play outside the cafe? Like in public?" Lena shook her head. "No, I only play at home. I'm not confident enough." "You should," he said. "You have something special in the way you play. It's not just notes, it's real." She smiled, touched by his words. "Maybe one day," she said softly. He smiled back. "If you ever do, I'll be there." They both laughed at that, but in the back of her mind, the idea didn't sound so impossible anymore. After that night, they began meeting regularly. Sometimes for coffee, sometimes for a walk in the park. They talked about everything and nothing. Old memories, favorite songs, random thoughts that popped into their heads. It wasn't rushed or forced. It just felt right. Lena noticed that Daniel had a quiet kindness about him. He listened without interrupting, always paying attention to small details. He never tried to impress her or fill silence with unnecessary words. Being around him made her feel calm, like the world wasn't so heavy. Daniel, on the other hand, found something healing in her presence. She didn't demand anything from him. She didn't ask about his past or his mistakes. She just accepted him as he was, and that simplicity was something he hadn't felt in years. One Saturday evening, they met again at the cafe. It was another open night, and the host recognized both of them. "Back again, you two?" he said with a grin. "Care to play something tonight?" Lena laughed nervously. "I wasn't planning to." Daniel looked at her. "Play something for me," he said softly. "Not for the crowd, just for me." She hesitated, her hands already trembling a little. But then she nodded. "Okay, just something small." When she sat down at the piano, she didn't play the same tune this time. She started a new melody, one that felt lighter, brighter, but still carried a trace of the old sadness. It was as if the first tune had finally grown into something new. As she played, Daniel watched her, feeling that same warmth rise inside him. Every note felt like a heartbeat, gentle and steady. He didn't even realize he was smiling until she finished. When she looked up, he was still watching her. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. The world around them faded, leaving only that quiet connection that words could never fully describe. After she returned to the table, he said softly, "That was beautiful." "What's it called?" She thought for a moment and smiled. "I don't know yet. Maybe you can help me name it someday." He nodded. "I'd like that." The evening went on, filled with soft conversation and quiet laughter. When they stepped outside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of rain. The streets glistened under the streetlights, and a light drizzle began to fall. Daniel took off his jacket and held it over her head, making her laugh. "You'll get soaked," she said. "So will you," he replied. "But it's worth it." They walked together through the rain, neither of them caring where they were going. The night felt light, like a song still playing somewhere behind them. When they reached the corner where they usually parted, Daniel looked at her and said softly, "I'm glad I went to that cafe that night." She smiled, her eyes shining under the streetlight. "Me too." They stood there for a moment longer, both silent, both feeling something they didn't yet need to name. That night, as she lay in bed, Lena replayed the evening in her mind. The rain, the laughter, the music. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready for whatever came next. And somewhere across town, Daniel sat at his piano, a dusty old one he hadn't touched in years, and pressed a single note, smiling quietly to himself. It was out of tune, but he didn't mind. The sound was enough to remind him that some melodies never really fade. They just wait for the right moment and the right person to bring them back to life. When the last note of her song faded, a soft silence settled across the cafe. For a moment, Lena didn't know what to do. Her fingers stayed frozen on the piano keys. The hum of conversation that had filled the place before was gone, replaced by something quiet and heavy. She lowered her head, unsure whether people were moved or just being polite. Then she stood quickly, trying not to make a scene, and hurried back toward her seat near the corner. She could feel her cheeks burning. Why had she agreed to this? She told herself it was supposed to be a simple tune, something light, not that sad piece she'd written long ago. But somehow, when her hands touched the keys, her heart had chosen that song instead. It wasn't meant to make anyone emotional. It was just the only way she knew how to express what words couldn't. Then came a gentle sound. Clapping. One pair of hands at first, then another, then more. The whole cafe joined in, some people smiling, others wiping at their eyes. Lena looked up, startled. The sound felt unreal, like she was outside her own body, watching the scene unfold from afar. She gave a small, awkward smile and nodded politely before sitting down. She didn't notice the man sitting alone at the back, watching her quietly, not clapping but staring at the piano as if lost somewhere deep inside his own mind. That man was Daniel. For the rest of the performances, Lena couldn't focus. People laughed, sang, told stories, and played games, but her mind stayed locked on that one strange moment when the music had taken control. It was both frightening and comforting. She'd never played that song for anyone before, not even her closest friend. It was personal, something she'd written on a rainy night years ago when she felt completely alone. When the event host finally announced a short break, the crowd scattered, chatting and ordering drinks. Lena walked to the counter to get a cup of tea, keeping her eyes low. She didn't want to draw attention. As she waited for her order, someone gently tapped her shoulder. She turned around, and there he was, Daniel, standing a few steps away, holding a coffee cup. His expression wasn't forced or overly friendly. It was calm, thoughtful, a little unsure. "Hi," he said softly. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but that song you played, it really stayed with me." Lena blinked, not knowing how to respond. "Oh," she said after a pause. "Thank you. It was just something simple." He shook his head slightly. "No, it wasn't simple. It sounded like it came from somewhere real." Her fingers tightened around her cup. "It did," she admitted. "It's something I wrote a long time ago. I didn't mean to play that one tonight, but my hands just chose it." Daniel smiled faintly. "I get that. Sometimes the heart takes over before the mind catches up." They stood in silence for a few seconds, both unsure whether to say more. Then he asked, "Would you mind if I joined you? I promise I'm not trying to make things awkward." Lena hesitated. She wasn't used to strangers asking to sit with her, but something about his tone made her nod. "Sure," she said quietly. "I guess that's what tonight's about, meeting new people." They found a small table near the window. The city lights glowed softly outside, blurring through the glass as cars passed by. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel said, "I'm not much of a social person. My sister talked me into coming tonight. Said I needed to get out there." Lena smiled slightly. "That sounds familiar. My friend said the same thing. I almost didn't come." He laughed under his breath. "Guess we both needed a push." As they talked, the awkwardness began to fade. Their voices found a rhythm, calm and gentle. Daniel told her he used to play guitar when he was younger but hadn't touched it in years. He said the sound of her piano made him remember his mother's old songs, the ones she used to hum in the kitchen while making breakfast. She passed away a few years back, he said quietly. But for a moment when you played, I could almost hear her again. Lena's heart softened. I'm sorry, she said. I know how that feels. I lost my dad when I was 19. That song I played, it was for him. Daniel looked at her with quiet understanding. Maybe that's why it hit me the way it did. Their words carried an ease neither expected. They weren't flirting or trying to impress each other. They were just two people sharing the kind of honesty that's rare between strangers. Every time Lena looked up, she saw that Daniel wasn't staring at her like most people did when they pretended to listen. His eyes were steady, kind, and filled with that rare thing, genuine attention. The host soon called everyone back together for the next part of the event. But instead of rejoining the larger group, they stayed by the window, lost in their own conversation. The noise around them faded, replaced by the quiet sound of jazz playing in the background. Daniel asked softly, Do you ever perform anywhere else? You should. You've got something special in your playing. Lena shook her head quickly. Oh no, I'm not really a performer. I only play at home. Sometimes when I need to clear my head, I get too nervous in front of people. He smiled. You seem nervous tonight too, but look how it turned out. She looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of her cup. Maybe it just worked because I wasn't thinking too hard. Exactly, he said. The best things happen when we stop trying to control them. They both laughed softly at that, realizing how similar they were in their cautiousness. Lena found herself relaxing, surprised at how easy it felt to talk to him. Usually conversations with new people drained her, but with Daniel it felt like time was slowing down in a good way. As the evening went on, the crowd thinned. Some people exchanged numbers, others left in groups. The host thanked everyone for coming, but Lena and Daniel were still sitting there, unaware that most of the chairs were now empty. When Lena finally noticed, she smiled. I guess we've talked through half the night, Daniel chuckled. Seems like it. I didn't expect this when I walked in. Neither did I, she said softly. I almost turned around at the door. He nodded. Same here. But I'm glad you didn't. Something about the way he said it made her heart stir. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the sincerity behind them. It had been a long time since someone said something like that to her and meant it. They decided to step outside together as the cafe staff began cleaning up. The night air was cool and gentle, carrying the faint sound of music from somewhere down the street. For a while they just stood there, not wanting the moment to end. Lena looked at the piano through the window one last time. You know, she said, I almost didn't play tonight. When they told me everyone had to do something, I thought about leaving. I hate being the center of attention. Daniel smiled. If you had left, I probably would have done the same. She laughed quietly. So we both would have missed this, he nodded. Yeah. And I think that would have been a shame. There was something unspoken in the air between them. Something gentle, not rushed or forced. Just a quiet connection that didn't need defining. As they said goodnight, Daniel hesitated for a second, then said, Would it be okay if we met again? No pressure, maybe just coffee sometime. I'd really like to hear you play again. Lena felt a small flutter in her chest. She smiled, shy but genuine. I'd like that too. They exchanged numbers, a simple act that suddenly felt meaningful. When she walked home that night, the city lights seemed a little brighter, the air a little lighter. She couldn't stop replaying the conversation in her head. The warmth in his tone, the way he listened without interrupting, the way he didn't make her feel small for being quiet. She knew she shouldn't read too much into it. It was just one evening, one conversation, but still something inside her had shifted. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was walking alone. She felt understood. Daniel, on the other hand, sat in his car for a few minutes before driving off. He looked down at the small napkin where he'd written her number, folded neatly in his hand. A faint smile spread across his face. He hadn't expected to feel this way again, to find comfort in someone's company, to feel moved by something as simple as a song. As he drove home, the melody of her piano lingered in his mind, looping softly like a whisper. He realized that sometimes life doesn't bring grand moments or dramatic changes. Sometimes it gives you something quieter, a song, a conversation, a spark that reminds you you're still capable of feeling something real. Neither of them knew where things would go from here. But both carried the same quiet thought that night, that maybe, just maybe, the music had brought them together for a reason. The next few days passed quietly, but neither Lena nor Daniel could stop thinking about that evening in the cafe. It wasn't just the music or the talk they'd shared. It was the feeling that something small yet real had begun between them. Lena found herself replaying his words in her head, especially when he said the tune reminded him of his mother. It was rare for someone to listen that deeply, to feel the emotion behind her music instead of just the sound. By the third day, Daniel texted her. It was a short, simple message, just a greeting and a question. Would you like to meet for coffee this weekend? Lena smiled when she saw it. She didn't answer right away. She wanted to seem calm, but the truth was she felt a warmth she hadn't felt in years. After a few minutes, she typed back, I'd love to. They met at the same cafe where they first crossed paths. It felt almost strange walking back in, knowing that this time wasn't part of a blind date event. It was just them. The piano in the corner stood quiet, the same one that had changed the course of their lives a little. Daniel was already there when she arrived, sitting by the window again. He waved as soon as he saw her, his smile easy and genuine. He had that same calm energy she noticed, the first night, the kind that made her feel safe without knowing why. I was starting to think you'd changed your mind, he teased lightly as she sat down. I almost did, she admitted with a laugh. Then I remembered I still owed you a cup of coffee. He grinned. I'll take that as a good reason. The conversation began just like before, soft, natural, with pauses that didn't feel awkward. They talked about their weeks, small things like work and daily life. But soon the talk drifted to deeper things. Lena spoke about her music, how she used to write short pieces but never showed them to anyone. Daniel listened closely, his attention unwavering. Why don't you? He asked. I guess I'm scared people won't understand them, she said. They're not the kind of songs that impress crowds. They're more like feelings turned into notes. Maybe that's exactly what people need, he said quietly. Something that feels honest. She looked at him thoughtful. Do you really think so? I do, he said. You don't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes the quietest things speak the loudest. Something about his words sank deep into her. She'd spent years thinking her voice, and whether spoken or played, didn't matter much. But Daniel made her feel differently. He didn't tell her to be more confident or to change. He just saw her for who she was and made her believe that maybe being quiet wasn't a weakness. When they finished their drinks, neither of them wanted to leave. Daniel asked if she'd like to take a walk nearby. It was late afternoon, and the air had that soft golden light that makes everything look warm. They walked through the park behind the cafe, leaves crunching under their feet. He asked her how she learned to play piano. She told him it started when she was a child, sitting beside her dad as he played old songs by ear. He never learned to read music, but he could listen to a tune once and play it perfectly. After he passed away, she stopped for years. Then one day she found an old notebook with his handwritten notes, small sketches of melodies he never finished. That's when she started composing her own. Daniel listened without interrupting, his eyes soft. That's beautiful, he said quietly. It's like he's still playing through you. Lena smiled faintly. Maybe. I like to think he would have been proud. They walked for a while in comfortable silence. At one point, Daniel said, You know, I haven't picked up my guitar in years. Maybe you've inspired me, she laughed. Then I guess we're even. That evening became the first of many. They began meeting every weekend, sometimes at the cafe, sometimes just walking through the park or sitting by the riverside. It wasn't dramatic or rushed. It was calm, steady, and real. Each time they met, they learned something new about each other. Daniel told her about his job at a local design studio, how it wasn't what he dreamed of but still gave him peace. He said music used to be his way of feeling connected to people, but after his mother's passing, he couldn't bring himself to play again. It just felt wrong, he said one night, like the notes didn't belong to me anymore. Lena looked at him gently. Maybe they were just waiting for the right person to listen. He smiled at her words. You really have a way of making things sound hopeful. She shook her head. I don't try to. I just say what feels true. There was one night when the cafe was nearly empty, just them and the sound of rain tapping the windows. Lena noticed the piano sitting there untouched. Daniel must have seen the way her eyes lingered on it because he asked softly, "Will you play something?" She hesitated. "Now? There's no one else here." "Exactly," he said. "Play for yourself," so she did. She walked over, sat down and let her hands move across the keys. This time it wasn't the sad melody she had played the night they met. It was something lighter, something that came to her in the moment, a soft flowing tune that carried both warmth and calm. Daniel sat back, watching her. The sound filled the small cafe, mixing with the rhythm of the rain outside. He could see her completely absorbed, her eyes closed, her face peaceful. It wasn't about performance. It was about presence. And for Daniel, it was one of the most beautiful things he had ever witnessed. When she finished, he whispered, "That's the sound of someone coming back to life." She looked at him, her cheeks a little pink. "You think so? I know so," he said. They sat there for a long time after, neither speaking much. The quiet didn't feel empty. It felt safe. From that night on, their connection deepened. They didn't talk about love or label anything. It wasn't about that yet. It was about healing, about two people slowly finding color again in a world that had felt gray for too long. One weekend, Daniel brought his old guitar. "It's been sitting in my closet forever," he said, laughing awkwardly. "I probably sound terrible now." Lena grinned. "Then we'll be terrible together." They spent hours trying to play something simple, laughing every time they missed a note. But slowly their sounds began to blend. Her soft piano chords, his gentle strumming. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. At one point, he stopped playing and looked at her. "You know what's funny?" he said. "We met because someone told you to play a simple tune. And now that tune's changed everything." She smiled, her eyes warm. "Maybe that's what music is for, and to bring people together who would have never met otherwise." He nodded. "I think so." As weeks turned into months, the cafe owner began to notice their routine. One evening, he approached them with a grin. "You two should play here together one night." "People would love it." Lena froze. "Oh, I don't know about that." But Daniel smiled. "Think about it," he said to her later. "Not for them, but for yourself. You've got something special. You shouldn't hide it." For days she thought about it. Part of her was scared. Scared of attention, of judgment, of not being good enough. But another part whispered that maybe it was time. So one evening she told Daniel, "Okay, let's do it." He looked surprised, then smiled wide. "Really?" "Really," she said. "But you're playing too." And so they practiced, not for perfection, but for joy. They chose 2 songs, one of hers, one of his. Every time they rehearsed, they found new laughter, new comfort. The night of their small performance, the cafe was packed more than usual. Lena's hands shook as she sat down at the piano, but Daniel's calm voice beside her steadied her. "You've got this," he whispered. When the first note left her fingers, the fear melted away. The same quiet honesty that once filled the cafe returned, wrapping around everyone in the room. And when Daniel joined with his guitar, their sounds blended like they had always belonged together. People listened, some smiling, some closing their eyes. It wasn't about skill, it was about soul. When they finished, the applause was soft but full of warmth. Lena turned to Daniel, her heart full, her eyes glistening. He leaned closer and said quietly, "You see? The quietest tunes really do speak the loudest." She nodded, smiling through the emotion she couldn't name. That night she realized that what had started as a simple blind date had become something far deeper. 2 hearts healing through music, one note at a time, and for the first time in years she felt alive again. After that night at the cafe, everything started to change for Lena and Daniel. What began as a small performance turned into something beautiful that neither of them expected. The cafe owner invited them to play again, and soon it became their quiet routine. Every Friday evening they would share a song or two with whoever came in. People started to recognize them. Sometimes strangers would come up after their set, thanking them for playing songs that made them feel something real. Lena always smiled shyly and said thank you, but inside she was amazed. For years she'd hidden her music from the world, believing it was too small to matter, and now, here it was. Reaching hearts just like hers had been reached that night she played for Daniel. But it wasn't just about the music anymore. It was about what had grown between them. Every week, every note, every shared laugh built something steady and quiet. A connection that neither had planned for but both deeply needed. There was no rush between them. They didn't talk about love or define their bond. It grew naturally, like the gentle rhythm of a song that didn't need words. Sometimes after the cafe closed, they would stay back and play for themselves, no audience. No noise, just the two of them under the soft light, the sound of keys and strings blending together. One evening, after one of their small performances, the cafe was almost empty. The rain outside painted little silver streaks across the window, and the smell of coffee still hung in the air. Daniel sat beside Lena at the piano. She leaned her elbow on the edge of the instrument, smiling at him. "You know," she said, "I never thought I'd play in front of people again." He looked at her with that calm, thoughtful expression she'd grown to love. "And now look at you. You've turned this place into something special." She laughed softly. "It's not me. It's us." He shook his head gently. "No, it's you. You're the reason people stop and listen. You make them feel." Her smile faded into something more quiet. "You make me brave," she said. Daniel didn't say anything for a moment. Then he reached out and placed his hand over hers. "You already were brave," and he said. "You just needed someone to remind you." The rain grew heavier, tapping against the window like a soft drumbeat. They sat there in silence, holding hands, listening to the sound of the storm. For both of them, that moment said more than any words could. Weeks turned into months, and the cafe became a second home for them. It wasn't about performing anymore. It was about sharing moments. They played songs about hope, about loss, about finding light after dark, and somehow their own story started to weave through those melodies. Lena began writing more music. Every tune had pieces of their journey hidden inside, the fear she once carried, the quiet strength she found, and the warmth Daniel brought back into her life. Sometimes she'd play for him at her apartment, the small living room lit by a single lamp, the notes soft and familiar. Daniel would sit by the window, eyes closed, just listening, and when she finished, he always said the same thing. "That's beautiful." One night he showed up at her door with a small package. "I have something for you," he said with a grin. Inside was a small recorder, the kind used to capture music. "I thought maybe we could record your songs," he said, "so people can hear them even when you're not here." Lena looked at the little device, her eyes glistening. "You think they're good enough for that?" "I don't think," he said softly. "I know." They began recording on weekends. It wasn't professional, just her piano and his guitar, a few microphones, and laughter in between takes. But when they played the recordings back, the sound felt raw and alive. Each song carried emotion that no editing could replace. One of those recordings was the song she played the night they met, the one that had touched Daniel's heart. They titled it The Simple Tune. Daniel helped her upload it online. He didn't tell her at first, afraid she'd hesitate. But within a week, messages started to appear. People saying the melody reminded them of lost loved ones, of moments they couldn't put into words. Lena was stunned. "They really felt it?" she asked, scrolling through the comments. Daniel smiled. "Of course they did. You played what people feel but can't always say." It became their shared project after that. They recorded more, little by little, each piece capturing a moment from their journey. Their music wasn't famous, but it reached the kind of people who needed it most. Those looking for comfort, for healing, for something quiet and real. Through it all, their bond deepened. It wasn't just friendship anymore, though neither had said it aloud. It was something gentler, like a melody you hum without realizing it's become part of you. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. The cafe owner told them he was planning a small anniversary event and wanted them to perform as the main act. "You two are part of this place now," he said warmly. Lena froze for a moment. "Main act?" she repeated. Daniel laughed. "I think he means we're the stars tonight." She rolled her eyes, but her heart raced. Performing still scared her sometimes, no matter how many times she'd done it. But Daniel's steady presence always made it easier. The night of the event, the cafe was filled with soft lights and the buzz of happy voices. Friends, regular customers, and even a few new faces filled the seats. The same piano sat in the corner, polished and waiting. Lena took a deep breath before walking up. Daniel gave her a reassuring nod. "Just like always," he whispered. She nodded back. Her hands trembled slightly, but as soon as she touched the keys, the nerves faded. The music took over, slow, emotional, full of warmth. When Daniel joined in on guitar, the sound blossomed. It felt like the night they first played together, only deeper, fuller. Every note carried a story. Their story. The tune that once belonged only to her now belonged to both of them. When the final chord rang out, the cafe erupted in gentle applause. Some people stood, others just smiled through tears. Lena turned to Daniel, her heart full, her eyes bright. He leaned closer and whispered, "You did it." She smiled. "We did." After the performance, as people mingled and congratulated them, Daniel disappeared for a moment. Lena thought he'd stepped outside for air, but when she looked up, she saw him returning, with something small in his hand. It was a small box. Her breath caught as he stopped in front of her. The crowd went quiet. "I was going to wait," he said softly, "but this feels right." He opened the box to reveal a simple silver ring, nothing flashy, just elegant and honest. "You once told me you play to remember the people you've lost," he said, "but I think music also helps us find the people we're meant to keep. You brought something back into my life that I thought was gone. You gave me peace again, and I don't ever want to lose that sound." Lena's eyes filled. For a moment she couldn't speak. The cafe was silent except for the soft hum of the lights. Then she whispered, "Yes." The crowd clapped softly, but neither of them noticed. Daniel slipped the ring onto her hand and she laughed through her tears, shaking her head as if still in disbelief. "I can't believe this started with a blind date," she said. He smiled. "And a simple tune." They stayed long after everyone left, sitting by the piano like they always did. The city outside was quiet, and the cafe lights cast a golden glow around them. Lena rested her head on his shoulder as he softly strummed his guitar. "Do you ever think about how different everything would have been if I hadn't played that song?" she asked. "All the time," he said. "And every time I do, I thank the universe that you did." She smiled. "Me too." As the night grew deeper, they played one last song together. It wasn't planned. It wasn't perfect. But it was theirs. Honest. Full of heart. Full of life. And when the final note faded, they both knew it wasn't just the end of a song. It was the beginning of something lasting. Their story wasn't about grand gestures or loud confessions. It was about two souls who found each other through music, through pain, through silence, and turned that connection into something beautiful. Long after the cafe closed that night, the piano still seemed to hold their melody in the air, as if refusing to let it fade, because some songs don't really end. They just keep playing quietly in the hearts of those who were lucky enough to hear them.